My family laughed at my little computer hobby during my brother's luxury engagement dinner until his Silicon Valley fiancée dropped her fork and asked why my name was the one her firm had been chasing for months. I wore the thrift store sweater on purpose. I want to be clear about that. It was not the sweater of a man who had forgotten to dress for the occasion, or who didn't own better options, or who had grabbed the wrong thing from the back of a closet in the specific fog of someone running late. I had selected it deliberately from a rack at a Goodwill on Milwaukee Avenue, 3 days before my brother's engagement dinner. Faded gray. A small pull near the left cuff where something had snagged it at some point in its previous life. The kind of sweater that communicates in the specific visual language of my family's social register. A precise and damning message about the person wearing it. The message: I am not doing well. I needed them comfortable. I needed them at the absolute peak of their arrogance. The fall hits harder from there. The restaurant was Aurelius, one of those Chicago establishments where the menu doesn't list prices and the sommelier's recommendations are described in terms of emotional journey rather than flavor profile, where the waitstaff wear black and move with the trained invisibility of people who understand that their job is to be present without being noticed. Preston had chosen it because Preston always chose places that allowed him to communicate, through the act of reservation, that he was a person who could get a table at Aurelius on 3 weeks' notice. He could. My father had called in a favor. I knew this. Preston would never acknowledge it. I arrived at 7:24 p.m. in a 6-year-old Subaru Outback that I had parallel parked 2 blocks away because the valet line had 3 Porsches in it, and I had decided that the Subaru communicated exactly the right thing and that the parking could wait. My family was already at the table. My father, Richard Sterling, at the head, because my father is always at the head in the way of a man who arrives early specifically to be at the head before anyone else can claim it. 62 years old. Wealth management firm he inherited and has grown through the specific combination of genuine business acumen and the absolute confidence of a man who has never been required to wonder whether his starting position was an advantage. He was wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, which is not a statement about wealth but about priority. He has always believed that appearing successful is indistinguishable from being successful, and has organized his entire external life around this belief. My mother, Caroline, to his left. A woman who has spent 35 years managing the social architecture of our family with the same focused attention that other people apply to careers, and who is genuinely skilled at it, and who has never quite forgiven me for being the kind of person whose social architecture could not be managed. My brother, Preston. 34, sales director at a fintech firm that rides, largely unacknowledged, on the reputation of its founder's previous company. He was wearing a silk tie that, as I later discovered, had been a gift from a client, which tells you everything about Preston's relationship to both fashion and professional boundaries. He is charming in the specific way of someone who has never needed to be anything else, who has always had the room arranged in his favor before he entered it. And Victoria Huang, 37, senior partner at Meridian Capital, one of the 3 or 4 most influential venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, which I knew because I had spent 2 years tracking her firm's portfolio with the specific professional attention that founders apply to the people who control the capital in their industry. She was sitting next to Preston with the contained energy of someone who has walked into many rooms that were not quite what they appeared to be and has learned to assess rather than react until the picture is clearer. She was assessing. She would be assessing all evening. I sat down in the thrift store sweater and smiled at everyone. Let me tell you who I am, because this story only makes sense if you understand the distance between what my family believed and what was true. My name is Arthur Vance Sterling. I am 29 years old. For the previous 4 years, I had been building a company called Quantum Nexus, an AI-powered logistics optimization platform that, at the time of this dinner, had just closed a $40 million Series B round and whose valuation had crossed a number that would have been meaningless to my family if I had said it out loud, because they would not have believed it. Quantum Nexus optimized global supply chains through machine learning, not the vague marketing speak use of that phrase, but the specific technical application of it. Predictive modeling for shipping route efficiency, real-time inventory adjustment across distributed warehouse networks, demand forecasting with a 94.7% accuracy rate that 3 of my current enterprise clients had verified in their own quarterly reports. The product worked. It worked better than anything else in the market. I knew this because I had built it with 4 people who understood the problem from the inside out, because I had spent the first 2 years of the company talking to logistics managers rather than investors, because I had prioritized the thing working over the thing being fundable. Eventually, fundable caught up with working. The $40 million Series B had closed the previous Thursday. The investors included 3 institutional funds and 2 corporate strategics. The valuation attached to that round made my father's wealth management firm, his real estate portfolio, and Preston's trust fund look, collectively, like a rounding error. I was known in industry circles as the Ghost of Chicago. This is not a name I gave myself. It was the name that appeared in a TechCrunch piece about AI logistics founders who refused to do press 18 months ago, which had become the name that investment analysts used when they were trying to get a meeting that my assistant had been declining for 8 months. Meridian Capital, Victoria's firm, had been trying to reach me since January. I knew this because my assistant Rachel, who has been with me since the beginning and who runs the operational side of the company with the precision of someone who genuinely loves logistics, had forwarded their 9th meeting request the previous this month with a note. These people are persistent. Board-approved term sheet ready. Might be worth a call. I had been planning to schedule the call. I had not anticipated that it would happen at a dinner table in the presence of my brother's silk tie and my father's black credit card and my mother's tragic sigh. 1 week before the engagement dinner, I had called a Bloomberg journalist named Marcus Chen, whom I had met at a conference 2 years ago and had kept in touch with in the way of people who respect each other's work and find each other useful, and told him that I was ready to go on record. We had agreed on an article, a comprehensive profile, the anonymous founder, the ghost of Chicago, the company that the entire logistics industry had been discussing for a year and a half without knowing who was behind it. Marcus had spent 3 weeks reporting. The piece was complete. I had asked him to time the publication for 9 p.m. on the evening of the engagement dinner. He had found this unusual. I had told him it was the correct time. He published at 9 p.m. I arrived at the dinner at 7:24 p.m. in a thrift store sweater and a 6-year-old Subaru. I wanted 90 minutes of arrogance. I got them. My father's first comment came before I had finished unfolding my napkin. He was speaking to Victoria in the pleasant conversational voice of a man performing his family for a new audience, the specific register of someone who is simultaneously introducing people and managing their impressions. "Don't worry about Arthur," he said with the warmth of someone saying, "Don't worry about the stain on the couch. He's our permanent work in progress, still finding his footing in the real world." Victoria looked at me. I smiled pleasantly. "Good to meet you, Victoria." "You too," she said. She was not performing warmth. She was assessing. Preston reached for the breadbasket and said, almost as an aside to Victoria, "We actually offered him an internship at the firm. Answering phones, getting coffee, something to get his feet under him." He turned it down. "Says he likes his freedom." He said freedom the way you say the name of someone's ex when you're trying to communicate that the relationship was a mistake. My mother put her hand over mine. The sigh arrived before the words. "He's just tinkering with a computer thing," she told Victoria. "You know how it is. Some people just need longer to find their path." I picked up my water glass. Around me, the table arranged itself into the familiar architecture of a Sterling family dinner. My father commanding from the head, my mother managing the emotional climate, Preston performing his version of success with the ease of someone who has practiced the performance long enough that it no longer feels like performance. My uncle Charles, my father's brother, who has spent 40 years orbiting the wealth management firm without ever quite being central to it, and who had spent 2 years feeding information about my activities back to my father in exchange for what I understood to be a better seat at the table, sat to my father's right and said nothing, because Charles's social strategy has always been to say as little as possible and observe as much as possible. The conversation continued. The wine was poured. The first courses arrived. I watched Victoria watch the table. She was doing it the way she looked at everything, I imagined, with the specific professional attention of someone who has been trained to see through the presentation to the underlying structure, to read between the lines of a pitch deck, to identify the gap between what something claims to be and what it actually is. She was seeing the gap. She hadn't said anything yet. The second hour. Preston had moved on to a detailed account of his professional accomplishments that required, by his telling, almost no infrastructure support from the existing firm, and represented almost entirely his own strategic vision, a version of events that his colleagues would not have recognized and that his clients would have found interesting. My father had interrupted twice to add context that made Preston's accomplishments sound even more impressive, which is the specific parenting technique of a man who has always believed that amplifying Preston made the family look better without examining what the amplification required. My uncle Charles had refilled his wine glass 3 times and was in the specific state of a man who is participating enough in the conversation to appear present without having committed to a position. My mother had told 2 stories about Preston's childhood that were designed to communicate his innate superiority, and had managed each one with the smooth efficiency of someone who has been telling these stories for decades. I had said approximately 4 sentences, each time redirecting the conversation back toward Preston and Victoria, with the pleasant neutrality of someone who has no particular stake in being the center of anything. Victoria had not redirected back. She was watching me. Not obviously, but I am a person who has spent 5 years in rooms with very intelligent people who are trying to figure out what I'm thinking, and I have developed the specific awareness that comes from being assessed regularly. She was assessing. At 8:47 p.m., my father pulled out his black card when the check arrived, the way he always does, the performance of generosity that is also the performance of ability, the specific gesture of a man who wants the table and the nearby waitstaff to register that he is the one covering it. He looked at me with the warmth of someone doing a kindness. "You should save your pennies for rent," he said. "I don't want to find you sleeping on my driveway when things go sideways." He said it pleasantly. Matter of fact, the specific cruelty of a man who doesn't think of it as cruelty because he has been saying versions of it for 29 years and has never encountered a version of me that pushed back. I had never pushed back. I looked at my phone under the table, the Bloomberg app. 8:52 p.m., 8 minutes. I looked at my father. "I appreciate that," I said. He nodded. He thought he had done something kind. Victoria set her fork down. The clink cut through the ambient restaurant noise with the precision of something that was not accidental, the sound of a woman who has decided to stop waiting and start moving. She turned to me, not to Preston, not to my father, to me, directly, with the full focused attention of someone who has been peripherally paying attention to something for 90 minutes and has decided the peripheral phase is over. What's the registered legal name of your company? She said. Preston made a sound, not words, just the sound of a man who does not understand what is happening, but who recognizes that something is happening that he was not consulted about. He reached for Victoria's hand. She moved it away without looking at him. The gesture was not dramatic. It was simply clean, the way her movements had been all evening. Nothing wasted. Arthur, she said, the legal name. I looked at her. I said 2 words. Quantum nexus. The specific quality of a silence that arrives when something large has just been introduced into a room, and the room has not yet processed it, is different from ordinary quiet. It is not the absence of sound. It is sound that is suspended, mid-breath, waiting. Victoria went completely still. The stillness of someone who has just confirmed coordinates. She said the name back, slowly. Quantum nexus. Then, are you Arthur Vance Sterling, the sole founder? Her voice had changed, not dramatically, but the clinical assessment had become something with more voltage in it. The specific electricity of someone who is looking at something they have been trying to find for a long time. The ghost of Chicago? My father laughed. The laugh of a man who is not certain what is funny but has identified that laughing might be the correct response. Well, Sterling is our last name, he said to Victoria, as though this were a clarification rather than a complete non sequitur. What's your point exactly? She didn't look at him. The person my firm has been trying to reach for 8 months, she said. We've had a board-approved term sheet since February. My partner James Chen has sent 9 meeting requests. Your assistant, she was still looking at me, has been declining them. She has good judgment, I said. Preston said, what are you? He stopped. Victoria reached into her bag. The motion was unhurried. The motion of someone who knows exactly what she's looking for and where it is. She pulled out her phone, set it on the table in the center, face up, hard enough that the silverware rattled. The Bloomberg homepage. The article had gone live at 9 p.m. The headline, The Ghost of Chicago. Inside, the 40-mailer company that's been hiding in plain sight. My full legal name in the first paragraph. My photograph, taken at a conference 18 months ago. The only photograph of me that existed in public circulation. In a plain gray sweater that was a different plain gray sweater than the one I was currently wearing. The company name, the Series B amount, the valuation. Victoria pointed at the screen with one finger and looked at my father. Is this the boring computer thing you were mocking an hour ago? She said. Is the verified founder of Quantum Nexus the same man you just told to save his pennies for rent? My father stared at the screen. The color left his face in a way that I will not pretend was not satisfying to watch. Not all at once. In stages, the specific draining of someone whose circulatory system is redirecting blood away from the face and toward whatever organ is currently processing the collapse of a worldview. My mother's hands went to her pearl necklace, a gesture so automatic that I suspected she had no awareness of making it. Preston looked at the phone, then at Victoria, then at me, then at the phone again. His face was doing something I had never seen it do, moving through multiple expressions simultaneously, the way faces move when the emotion is arriving faster than the face can organize it. Shock, jealousy, something that might have been horror, something that was definitely recalculation. My Uncle Charles sat with his wine glass halfway to his mouth and did not move. He was frozen in the specific way of someone who has been feeding information about a person to their family for 2 years and has just discovered that the information he had been feeding was a small and irrelevant piece of a picture he did not understand. Victoria was still looking at my father. She was not performing anything. She was not enjoying this in the way that enjoyment usually presents. There was no satisfaction in her expression, no heat, just the clean, direct attention of someone who has identified a discrepancy and wants it acknowledged. Arthur, she said, turning to me, I owe you an apology. We should have been more persistent. Rachel did her job, I said. The timing worked out. Preston said, how long have you? 4 years, I said. And you didn't tell anyone? I looked at my brother, at the silk tie, at the hand that had reached for Victoria's and been moved away. I told people who asked, I said. He opened his mouth, he closed it. I stood up. I smoothed the front of the thrift store sweater. The gesture was deliberate. One last reminder of the object and what they had decided it meant. Victoria, I said, it's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you. Tell James Chen to have his team call Rachel on Monday at 9. She'll coordinate the Series B discussion. Victoria nodded. We'll be there. I looked at my father, the man who had spent 29 years using my existence as a punchline, who had told Victoria not to worry about me before I had finished sitting down, who had told me to save my pennies for rent while his black credit card was still on the table. He was looking at the Bloomberg headline, not at me, at the headline, with the expression of a man who is trying to find the error in a document that does not contain one. I trust you've got the bill, I said. He didn't answer. I walked out. I was at the valet stand retrieving my Subaru when I heard the sound. Not loud, not dramatic. A small sound, carried through the restaurant's entrance by the specific acoustics of a quiet room. The clink of something small and hard placed on a tablecloth. A ring. I did not look back. I had not planned for Victoria. I had not arranged for her to be there, had not known she was the one coming to the engagement dinner until Preston had mentioned her name in a call 2 weeks earlier, and everything I knew about Meridian Capital had arrived at once, with the specific quality of information arranging itself into a shape you hadn't predicted. I had not arranged what she did. Victoria Huang made her own decisions about the Sterling family. She did it with the information that was in the room, and she did it in the time it takes for a diamond ring to travel from a finger to a tablecloth, and she did it without consulting anyone. That is, in my experience, months. Exactly how the best decisions are made. 3 months later, the Meridian Capital Partnership closed in January. Not the Series B terms I had been declining. A different structure, negotiated across 4 meetings with James Chen and 2 other partners, in which Meridian came in as a strategic investor with board representation and a clean shareholder agreement that my legal team reviewed for 3 weeks before I signed it. Rachel sent a meeting summary after each session. She always does. My father called in November. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that lasted 4 minutes and 47 seconds. The first 2 minutes described how proud he had always been of my intelligence and my work ethic. The third minute asked whether we might have dinner. The fourth minute mentioned that his wealth management firm was considering a technology advisory panel and wondered whether I might be interested in participating. I listened to it twice. I did not call back. My mother called in December. Her message was shorter. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know how to be sorry correctly for something this large, and she was asking for time to figure it out. I thought about that message for a week. Then I called her back. We have been finding our way since December, slowly, in the specific way of people who are trying to rebuild something on a foundation that turned out to be different from what either of them thought. It is not resolved. It is real. Preston and Victoria did not reconcile. This was not information I sought out. It arrived through my cousin Diane, who keeps track of these things the way some people keep track of weather systems. Victoria had returned to San Francisco the following morning. The ring, Diane told me, had been returned by courier 2 weeks later with no note. Preston called me once in January. He did not leave a voicemail. I saw his name on my screen and watched it ring and made no decision about whether to answer, because by the time I made a decision, it had already stopped. He has not called again. My uncle Charles, who had spent 2 years feeding information about my activities to my father for a better seat at the table, sent me an email in November congratulating me on the Bloomberg piece and asking if I needed any introductions in the Midwest financial community. I did not respond to the email. The company is doing well. This is the sentence that covers more than I have time to describe. 2 new enterprise clients, a partnership with a European logistics network, a product update that improved the demand forecasting accuracy from 94.7 to 96.2%, which Rachel described in a summary to the board as a significant material improvement, and which I described to my engineering team as the thing we always knew was possible. I still drive the Subaru. I have not replaced it. Not because I am performing anything. The performance was for one dinner, and it served its purpose, and it is over. But because the Subaru is fine, and replacing something that is fine with something more expensive is not a decision that makes sense to me, and I have spent 29 years being shaped by a family that could not understand that. I live by my own logic now. I have always lived by my own logic. It just took until a dinner in November, at a restaurant where the menu doesn't list prices, with a Bloomberg headline published at precisely the right moment, for the world to see it clearly. The thrift store sweater is in the back of my closet. I have not donated it. I keep it because some things deserve to be remembered exactly as they were. Not cleaned up, not contextualized, not made more comfortable by time. A faded gray sweater that a man wore to his brother's engagement dinner, deliberately, because he wanted his family comfortable, because he wanted them at the absolute peak of their arrogance, because he had spent 29 years learning that the fall hits harder from there. He was right.